Good afternoon, all. Thank you for joining us on the first UK Automation Forum of 2025. Now, you might be thinking Gale looks a little different. So, for those of you that have missed the emails from marketing, my name is Tom Flood. I'm a co-founder of Engineers Insight and your new host of the UK Automation Forum. I just want to say a quick thank you to Gail Hunt for being an amazing host the past year and enjoy your retirement. Another quick message to you, the audience. Due to the amount of information we're looking to cover in the discussion, we encourage you to submit your questions through the comments section in Zoom, and then these questions will then be answered offline, added to the event summary, and will be published on the UK Automation Forum website in the coming days. From that website, you can catch up on all of last year's events, and you can also register on the site to be notified of all of our upcoming forums for this year. So today's forum will be about the learnings from 2024 and our plans for 2025. So my two panelists today are Peter Williamson, CEO of Automate UK, and Mike Wilson, Chair of the UK Automation Forum and Chief Automation Officer at the MTC. Afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Tom.
I'm glad I got all of that out. I thought I was going to trip over my words. Right, let's start from the beginning with you, Mike. It's good for me, but it's also good for new viewers that we've got to the forum. So what is the UK Automation Forum? Why did you set it up, and what are its aims?
The UK Automation Forum is really the brainchild of Automate UK. And it was created sort of fundamentally when PPMA and BAR and UK IVA rebranded themselves as Automate UK, because that gave the opportunity to create a vehicle that was very much automation focused. And what we're really trying to do is to bring together experts, end users, policymakers, suppliers, basically all sorts of people that have got an interest and expertise in automation, to talk about the challenges and relevant topics relating to the adoption of automation technology in the UK. We are completely independent, so we're not particularly aligned with anybody. But what we're trying to do is get the collective views of these experts and generate a voice of industry that can help drive more collaboration, educate industry on the benefits of automation, help break down the barriers. Because one of the challenges, and I'm sure lots of people have heard me say this before, but one of the challenges we have in the UK is we don't use automation as much as we probably should, not as much as our major competitors. And we're looking to use this the UK Automation Forum as a vehicle to generate more discussion, to talk about the relevant topics, but do it completely non-aligned to any particular supplier or any particular association, just so we can have an honest and open conversation about what are the challenges, what do we need to do, and how can we help industry adopt more of this technology.
Peter, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I'd just echo what Mike said, really. I think having the platform to really talk about all the things and challenges that we face as an industry, to try and gather that momentum and get greater adoption of automation is what we're really trying to achieve. And I think there's lots of misinformation and myths out there about how challenging it can be to adopt automation. I think some of the conversations that we're having are really just kind of reaffirming what the values are and what the benefits are of adoption, but also that it's more accessible and more straightforward than many people might think. And I think if we can get that message across and make more people come to the topic, then I think we've really had some success on that front.
Yeah, it's quite easy to fall into a bit of an echo chamber, I suppose. Being Automate UK, the trade association, I'm assuming all the members buy into automation. It's how you spread that message outside of our own network to reach general industry, to reach young people, teachers. Me and you had this discussion recently about I get teachers ask me the question, like away from the students, like almost whispering it to me, like, are robots taking jobs? And I have to try and say that, no, that is complete misconception of what's happening here.
No, that's certainly true. And you know, I think one of the fears I have, if you like, is if we look back to the 70s and 80s, manufacturing in the UK was declining. You know, we were pushing a lot of manufacturing overseas, and you know, if we don't don't change the narrative, if we don't make our or help our manufacturing businesses become more productive, we're going to continue to see a decline of manufacturing. And personally, and I know you guys also support this, is we really do want a strong UK manufacturing sector. It's kind of like, to me, it's the bedrock of the economy. And unless we get manufacturing to be productive and competitive and to grow, then we're going to struggle in terms of paying for things like the NHS and education and so on. But the other side of all of that is automation helps it become more productive, and that then generates more jobs. So it's actually the opposite. It's not about robots taking jobs. It's about robots making our businesses more competitive and then enabling them to employ more people, often, and to be fair, in better paid, more skilled roles, because the robots are doing the mundane, the repetitive, the arduous kind of tasks, the kind of things that really we shouldn't be getting people to do anymore.
Yeah.
And the evidence backs that up as well. If you look at some of the largest adopters of automation and robotics in the UK, they're the big automotive plants, and supplies into that, and they're growing and adding staff and developing more opportunities. You know, Jaguar Land Rover was on its knees, and now if you look at it, it's probably the biggest adopter of robots in the UK, and a huge employer. So it creates jobs, it creates wealth, as opposed to doing the opposite, as many people fear.
Yeah, it's also quite easy for general public to sort of look overseas and actually we can't compete with cheaper labour costs. You know, somewhere like China. But actually, you look at China's adoption of automation; they're way ahead of most of the world, really. But still, the general perception is it's cheap labour. That's why they get all the work. But actually, we're just not competing. We're too far off the mark.
And the irony is that part of the reason why, as a country, we didn't adopt a lot of automation was because we were too keen to rely on cheap labour in the manufacturing process that we did have. Of course, that's not so accessible now. So people are struggling to recruit and fill those roles. And obviously, automation now becomes much more attractive because you just physically can't find the people to carry out the tasks that are required.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on a little bit. The forum itself, Peter, you want to take this one? How successful was the first year?
Well, from my perspective, extremely successful from a number of different reasons. I think the first one is that we managed to have 7 different events during the course of the year, which were hosted at various different places, and we can talk a bit more about the content of those later on. But the thing that pleased me the most, and Mike mentioned it earlier, the collaboration with other associations, with other organisations, and the buy-in that we've had from end users as well has been really, really positive. So the fact that people are keen to get involved, sit around a table and have the conversations that need to be had, I think from my perspective, really does show a level of success that what we tried to achieve is starting to happen. On the other side of the coin, obviously, success looks like getting this message out to as many people as possible. And the thing that's really encouraged me as well is that the number of people logging on, watching the events, watching them again further down the line, or once they've been recorded, and the visitors to the website have steadily increased during the course of 2024. Sorry, and of course with some of the events that we've got planned for 2025, we expect to see that continue driving forward. So yeah, it's a success because we've got the right people around the table, and it's becoming more successful as we're getting more and more people logging in and having a look and seeing what we're doing.
Okay. Any of those forums, Mike, throughout the year that has really stood out to you? Any conversations that have stuck with you? Well,
we covered quite a range of topics, from finance and skills, getting young people into engineering. But I think one of the highlights for me actually was the very first event that we did, and partly because, yes, we were starting something new. We'd not done it before. We had a great range of participants, including Make UK, MTA. And I think, but one of the key elements to it is we tried very hard to start kind of going in the direction that we wanted to follow. And we invited a guy, Jonathan Thacker from Walsall Wheelbarrow, to come along and speak, and he really kind of took over the whole show because of his experience. So, Walsall Wheelbarrows make wheelbarrows, not much of a surprise. But they're a traditional Black Country, West Midlands metal bashing type business, and and you kind of think, well, they're not going to be the kind of company that's going to use automation robotics. But actually, and to be honest, I've been to see the business since we had that session, and it was almost an eye opener. They've got a shop floor that's got about 20 workers on it assembling wheelbarrows, but they've also got 20 robots. And the robots are doing welding, they're unloading tube bending, they're doing press handling, all the kind of more arduous, mundane tasks. And the workers they've got are doing the more skilled tasks, actually assembling the wheelbarrows and such like. And when they've been doing robots for probably about 10 years, so it is a journey. It's not something you do overnight. But they're a family business. They're an SME, and to me, it's just a great example of if you like, a traditional SME, not the kind of business that you'd expect to be into high tech, but something that's just gone and done it and done it very successfully. They've not made people redundant through that journey. They've upskilled their workforce, who now operate and program robots rather than performing the manual tasks themselves. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but they've got something like 60% of the UK market for wheelbarrows, and it's just a great success.
Yeah.
And I know there are more businesses out there like that, and that's one of the things. If there are companies listening to this think that they've got a story to tell, then we'd be very keen to engage with them, very keen to bring them on, because it's all very well listening to people like me, because I've been doing this a long time, promoting it a long time, but to listen to a business who's been through the journey, done it, and willing to share the challenges as well as the successes, the lessons they learn. That is very informative, and that to me is really one of the key things in terms of what we're about, is trying to get those messages out there to show UK manufacturing, particularly all the SMEs, that this isn't just tech for the high tech businesses, the JLRs of this world. This is technology that is very appropriate to all SMEs throughout all of UK manufacturing.
Yeah. I know you called for success stories or people that have done similar. I'd like to hear from people that are put off. What is it that's stopping them? Because there's a hell of a lot in the UK that I've sold automation for a few years before doing this, and you think you've got them on the hook, and then there's always a no. And in the past few years, we've had a lot of challenges, global challenges, pandemic, supply chain issues. We have now issues with talent. But what is it? I always say to people, what is it that's going to actually push people to actually do it? And is it like the budget that's it's going to be more expensive to employ people, so they have to automate? Who knows? But what is it that's putting SMEs off? Is it lack of funding? Is it worrying about future talent? Is it existing talent they can't reach? They're now too expensive. What is it? Because we need to address those problems as well as a bigger answer to industry.
Yeah.
Because if we can address some of those things, then more people will adopt. It's okay showing a couple of good stories, but we really need to fix the foundations, I suppose.
That's a very fair comment, Tom, and I would welcome anybody that's willing to come forward and say what put them off, what were their challenges, what were their barriers, because we kind of think we know the answer, and I am asked this quite a few times, and I generally say things like, well, if I knew there was a simple answer to that, I'd have made a fortune by now and be retired and in Barbados or something. But so it isn't a simple answer. And to be honest, some of the things we did explore throughout the events were finance, access to finance. We got NatWest involved in one session, and we did talk about that. We did talk about skills. We talk about the things that we understand, but you're very right. If somebody's willing to come forward and say, these are the reasons why I haven't done it, then maybe we can do something about that, because unless we really do understand that, we are going to struggle to fix the problem.
Yeah, and just to the audience, you don't have to come on and tell us the problems on a Zoom or anything. Just contact us. You know, the more people that tell us that sort of feedback, the better. Okay, so let's look at like BARA data, Peter. What developments have there been in robotics and automation 2024?
It's been a challenging year, I think, 2024. Obviously, there's been a lot of upheaval during the course of the year. We've had general elections in the UK. Well, I think it's something like a third of the world's population voted in a single year. So it's created a bit of instability and a bit of a lack of confidence in the market. And we've actually seen that in the numbers. So BARA surveys members to find out what's happening with their sales during the course of the year. And we feed that information into IFR, the Federation, International Federation of Robotics, and to build a picture up of what's happening in the market. 2024 has been a challenging year in comparison to previous years. And actually a lot of the reason where that challenge has come from is around demand in the automotive industry. We've seen that has definitely been in decline in 2024, or maybe it was slightly higher than it perhaps ought to have been in 2022 and 2023 with some larger orders. But some interesting data has come out of what we've looked at, and it's that certain sectors that would historically rely on cheaper labour, like retail, like food and beverage production, are actually we're seeing quite a significant increase in the usage of robots in those industries. So in 2023, those sectors only accounted for 8% of all robots sold by the members that we surveyed. In 2024, it's actually up to 20%, and there's been a significant growth. So it's 20% of a slightly smaller number, but actually in those sectors, there's been a significant growth in deployment. And trying to read the stories behind that and what are the reasons is obviously clearly important. And from our understanding, it's been mainly two factors that have driven that, and that's the availability and the cost of labour. Probably to begin with, it's more driven by the availability of labour, that just people prepared to do some of the dull, dirty and dangerous jobs, the repetitive, if you look at the food industry, there's been a significant increase in end-of-line palletising. Within the food industry, there's generally not a lot of space at the end of a production line for doing this sort of work, and it's normally been done by humans in cramped and pretty unpleasant environments. By automating that process, you can obviously increase throughput, and you can move those people into areas where they're going to be better utilised. So we've definitely seen that drive things forward. We are now seeing at the latter end of 2024, and as we move into 2025, an increase in inquiries and people talking to our members about potential in automation. And we may be putting two and two together and making five, but clearly we're hearing from industry that a lot of people are concerned about the increasing costs of labour and are clearly thinking about automation as a way of using or being able to grow using that automation rather than trying to go out and recruit additional staff. We're definitely not seeing that automation is being considered as being a replacement for the existing staff, but it's being seen as a more viable opportunity for growth than trying to recruit more people. It will be interesting to see how the numbers pan out in 2025 as to whether that initial interest actually manifests itself into an increase in demand. I'm sure there's some other comments that Mike can make around the challenges that we face as a country in terms of increasing that deployment. Even if the demand and the will is there, the skills, the knowledge, the understanding is something that we still need to work on and develop so that we can catch up with other paces globally. So there's going to be a lot of pressure put on our integration and automation supply chain if those things really do come to pass during the next 12 months.
Did you want to add anything to that, Mike?
Yeah, I think it's worth just kind of noting it's not just the increasing cost of labour. People have been talking about is NI, the increases in NI really going to impact the increasing adoption. I think it's also worth bearing in mind, and Peter mentioned it, but within manufacturing, Make UK report that there's something like 58,000 vacancies today. And they're not going to get filled anywhere. You know, there aren't 58,000 people sitting around at home wanting to work in manufacturing and can't get a job. So the only way we're going to fill those vacancies really is by increased adoption of automation. Now I have heard Make UK have estimated that 58,000 people is a lost opportunity of something like £6 billion, which is quite a chunky number. And if you do some sort of short back of the fag packet kind of calculations, the cost of putting robot systems in to replace those vacancies is something like £5 billion, which I know is a big number, but that effectively means you get a payback of less than a year on that return on investment. And I know that's not necessarily the story for every individual business, but collectively that's kind of what it means to our economy. And therefore, I think that's why it's becoming increasingly important. And not only do we have skill shortages in manufacturing, but we also have, or labour shortages, we also have labour shortages, Peter mentioned, all the way through the economy. So it's not like we can go and steal a whole bunch of people from somewhere else to fill the roles in manufacturing. So we've got to do something different. I do think, we have seen, I think the government started to recognise that things need to change. We are, hopefully we're going to get an industrial strategy. We haven't had one of those for quite a while. Hopefully, we do know through our conversations with Department of Business and Trade and the Department of Science and Innovation Technology that there is increasing interest in robotics and automation, because they desperately want to grow the economy, and they kind of recognize that productivity is a key challenge in terms of achieving that, and robotics automation is one of the solutions to that challenge. I'm not predicting that we're going to get lots of support and investment and all those other things, because everybody knows that there's a shortage of money out there, but at least it's a change in mindset, which to me is a positive step. I think the other thing that we probably need to kind of consider with this is we in the UK, and I know I'm generalizing, but we have a habit of talking ourselves down. Problems become big problems very quickly. The messages start to become negative very quickly, and I think that tends to put people off. It dents the confidence bit. And I do think that we need to be a bit more optimistic about what the potential is. How we could be successful, and for the business owners to be thinking longer term. And yes, the investment in new technology is always a risk. There's always a learning curve, but go out and get help and maybe just take that little bit of a risk, because there are businesses out there that have done it very successfully, and it puts them then in a prime position as things turn around and the economy grows again and such like. If you're in that competitive position, you're going to be successful.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point of things like the exhibitions. I know over years it's been harder to get people through the door, but that is the time for people that are thinking about automation to actually see it, and to see multiple vendors, not to be pigeonholed down one route, but to go and talk to people that have done it, or people that can install it, can commission, that can support you from all manual labor to a higher throughput, or whatever sales pitch that person wants to give. I've been on that stage multiple times. I'm also going to maybe put you on the spot, Peter, but the point about getting government interested, could we not speak to members and ask them to reach out to their local MP and invite them as a special guest to their stand at the show, and they can actually see how amazing manufacturing is?
It's a really interesting one. One of the early events that we had on the forum was talking about what government could do, and it was interesting because the event was in April, so it was before the general election. So there's a lot of things that we were asking for that. And the people in the conversation were trade associations, like us, MTA, Make UK, and Gambika were talking. And, you know, we was like, well, we need an industrial strategy. Okay, now we've got a new government, and the new government is looking at an industrial strategy, but they've gone out for consultation, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands upon people who've consulted on that industrial strategy. And they'll be from all different industries, not just manufacturing, but they'll be from finance, they'll be from the arts, they'll be from education, and they'll all be vying for their bit of what they can get from the government to support their sector. And I think it's absolutely essential that as associations, we work really closely with our members, and we work closely with each other. We continue to cooperate in the way that we're doing here. And, you know, there's a lot of work that goes on at places like Automate and MTC and MTA, where we do talk directly to government, and we do try and get them involved and understand the challenges that our members face, and also what our members' technology can do for the benefits of the economy. And, you know, we'll continue to do that. But like you say, there's nothing better than actually getting the MPs in front of their constituent members or constituent businesses, and actually seeing what they do and seeing what value they add to the economy, and seeing some of the challenges they face, and having government be able to actually support them in overcoming some of these challenges. And, you know, the government will rely on evidence to make the decisions, and it's up to us to pull together that evidence, whether it be quantitative in terms of data that we've managed to go out and find, or qualitative in terms of putting people in front of people with a story to tell, a success story, or a challenge that they're facing. And yeah, we will support and help, you know, those businesses to do that, but we would definitely encourage them to act themselves as well and go out and do that.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, put it on the spot now.
That's all right.
Mike, plans for 2025. How do we build on the success of 2024?
Well, I mean, I could say more of the same, but that's not really a constructive answer. It's about continuing, I think, is to be fair. So we did an event on adoption of robots and automation in the food industry at the PPMA show back in September, and we had a good panel, you know, including M&S, including Greg's, you know, people that really are in the space, as it were. But we're now planning an event to take place at the Appetite for Engineering conference, where we'll be looking maybe a little bit more futuristic about what technology is going to do to help the food industry in the future. We did, as I mentioned, a particular event around finance last year. Peter can say more about this, but we are now undertaking a survey on the issues related to finance, and the reason we're doing that is because we had the conversation we were having with the banks was fundamentally along the lines of, you know, we think that businesses can't access finance. The banks think that the businesses don't need the finance. You know, they think they're providing all the finance they're being asked for. So that there's obviously some kind of disconnect there. Yeah. So we're trying to find out more about that. And we're planning then, having done the survey, to then have an event around that topic to discuss the output from that survey, to see if we can delve into that a bit more, understand it better, and going back to the point you made very early on, really understand what the problems are in terms of what are the barriers to adoption. So it is very much about building on the kind of conversations we had last year, trying to encourage more businesses to look at this, come to exhibitions, reach out for help is kind of one of the key things. You know, there are independent sources of advice, and Automate UK can definitely help with all of that. So, but get people more engaged to understand, to get them understanding what the benefits are and why they should be looking at it. But in parallel with that, to help us understand what the barriers are, so that we can then make sure that we can focus on those topics and try and address them and remove them.
Just to build on that, as Mike and we both of you have mentioned previously, you know, there are perceived barriers to adoption of automation, and there are some tools out there which are really designed to identify where a business is and how capable it is of taking on the new technologies or even existing technologies that are out there. and it's called SIRI, Smart Industry Readiness Index. We've got two sort of leading minds together that will be explaining, what the benefits of SIRI are, how it works, and how members can or businesses can kind of use these tools available to them to say, okay, we've got these challenges that we're facing as a business. We've got these skill sets within our business. Actually, if we utilize them correctly, there is a way for us to adopt the technology without it being daunting and scary and challenging and having to go out and use huge additional resources. And it might be taking small steps into it. Some companies possibly don't even have a way of collating and looking at the data that they have within their business in order to make smart business decisions. If you can digitalize and automate, if you like, that process, that then leads you on to making smarter business decisions, which clearly is a benefit, but doesn't necessarily need a huge amount of investment in physical plant. What you then hope spawns on from that is they see the benefit of the technology, and they can see how technology will play a pivotal part in continuing to grow and develop and advance their businesses. And yeah, as I say, we've got a couple of good speakers, and I think that's an event we're looking at doing in March. But hopefully, just another way of breaking down some of those barriers to adoption.
Just to add to that, if I may, Tom, one of the things that came out of our discussion at the PPMA show was, particularly for those businesses that are doing it, for the first time, you're not aiming for lights out, automated factories. That's kind of one of the perceptions. Everybody kind of thinks that they've really got to go that far, and you don't. It's about finding where to start. Pick a relatively simple task, as Peter just said. Even if you're looking at robots, pick something relatively simple, and it may not be the biggest challenge you've got in the factory, but just start with that one and go up that learning curve, and then move on to the more complicated things later. It really is a journey. It's not something you're going to solve in 1 year. You've got to think about this for where do you want your business to be over the next 10 years, and kind of plan for it. And I think if more businesses were interested or willing to do that, I think we'd see more success.
Either of you have any projections for 2025? Not necessarily just the forum, but market trends, automation.
I think we'll see the trends continue from 2024 of industries that aren't traditional adopters of automation being forced into, in the best possible way, adopting automation because of the necessity to do so, to maintain competitiveness globally, to fill the unfilled roles that they can't fill, and to feel confident that they're maintaining and controlling the costs of production. I strongly feel that those industries will continue to invest and look at how automation can be central to their growth and their development.
Yeah, and I think the UK is kind of almost crossroads. Sounds a bit dramatic, if you like, but there's an awful lot of factors that are really making the case for greater use of automation. The cost of labour, the availability of labour, the cost of the automation is always coming down. It's almost like if we were going to change our direction of travel, now is probably about the right time. One of the things Peter mentioned earlier is the supply chain, the systems integrators and such like. If UK manufacturing kind of woke up tomorrow and said robots are a great idea, we're going to buy 20,000 of them, the UK supply chain could not deliver. And that's something, that is potentially a concern. We need to find ways of increasing the availability of the skilled people to implement these kind of solutions. And we're working on that kind of activity in terms of developing apprentice programs and such like to fill those kind of gaps. We're also got lots of challenges in terms of just general availability of engineers, and using robots in schools, toy robots as it were, is a great way of getting more school kids to engage with technology. And in particular girls, by the way, they really do engage in those kind of schools robot competitions. So we need to do a lot of that just to fill our engineering gaps anyway. But I do think one of the key issues for me is the kind of demographics of our workforce is changing. It's being forced to change. I can't remember the exact numbers, but the average age of people in manufacturing is over 50. And we're not attracting maybe the younger generation into manufacturing. And I think some of that is because they don't want to do the kind of jobs that their parents or their grandparents did. You know, the younger generation today was brought up with technology. You know, they've had iPhones or mobile phones, they've had computers. You know, they understand all this. This is not alien to them. And when they go to work, if we can give them an environment where they're going to interact with technology, firstly, they're not afraid of it. It's, you know, the skills issue isn't really there. But secondly, they're more likely to want to come and work in those places. And I think manufacturing needs to kind of recognize that if it wants younger generations to be attracted as the workforce of the future, it's got to adopt technology as one of the attractions, if you like, to get those people into the business. And we're not going to see a step change, but I think we're starting to see those kind of changes coming through, and therefore, you know, over the next few years, we have a significant opportunity to really change the way UK manufacturing operates.
Yeah, I'll tell a quick anecdote that sort of backs that up, Mike. So we went and did an Engineers Insight talk at Corby Sixth Form when they opened last year. And we had 20 or 30 students that thought they'd want to become engineers. So they came and joined the talk. We had Igus with us with their Rebel Cobot. And just as I was about to open, we get a knock on the door, and it was another tutor that said, any chance you could have these other 20 to 30 kids that had chose to do a talk from someone from the NHS? The speaker couldn't make it. So, oh God, okay. They come in. They were the most engaged because they'd never seen a robot move before. They'd never seen how easy it was to set up.
Yeah.
We had a vacuum gripper on the end of it, and they were throwing their iPhone to it and moving. You know, it's just something short like that gets their imagination going. And I asked the class, two classes at the end, who now is thinking about a career in manufacturing? And 90% of that healthcare group put their hand up. And all it took was half-hour session to show them how cool it is to be an engineer.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, we're obviously trying to do a lot of work to make the perception change within schools, that if you look at other countries in the world that have been far better adopters of automation, engineering and the term engineer is seen as a profession, as a, you know, as a up there with a doctor, or, you know, someone like Germany, for example, right? It's a highly skilled profession and one that's admired. If you look at it in the UK, a lot of people's perception of an engineer is more of a mechanic, or, you know, not necessarily always seeing it as this highly skilled job. And I think that's a lot of that narrative comes out of, you know, what kids are told, what they see at school, what they hear from their parents. And I think there's a real cultural challenge that we have to change that narrative to say, you know, engineering is a very skilled, rewarding career to get into. And, you know, if schools can do a better job at providing those career pathways. And, you know, you look at engineering will gladly take the 16-year-old that doesn't want to be at school anymore because they don't really understand what they're learning academically, or it doesn't resonate with them. If they get into practical situations where they can actually see what they're learning is being applied, they just fly. And I think the more that we can do to signpost children into apprenticeships, into careers, you know, in engineering as an alternative. I'm not saying it's right for everyone, but for those that it is right for, it should be an easier journey than it currently is.
Yeah. Maybe if I may, just to add to that, the last event that we did last year, we actually had 3 apprentices on the panel. It's not all been just old people like me and Peter. Well, sorry, me at least. We had 3 apprentices on the panel, providing their insights as to their journey and where they were hoping to go, and what the opportunities were, and so on. And one of the kind of key statements, which was kind of resonated really, was one of the apprentices, I think, was asked what kind of job they wanted to do when they finished their apprenticeship, and or for their future career. And the response was, well, I don't know, because the job I want to do hasn't yet been created, doesn't yet exist.
Yeah.
And that to me is really quite exciting. You know, there are lots of opportunities going to happen in the next few years, and we need to engage the younger generation so that they're interested and ready to participate in all of that. We need to get the foundations in place, but it's going to be an exciting time, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a subject that I could talk about for hours. I think we're actually going to plan at doing a panel around skills at the automation show. A few people that are in skills in the UK and an apprentice. I think the point that you just made, Mike, about having a panel of apprentices is so important, because the amount that I sat in the audience and there hasn't been a single person under 40 talk about what excites kids, or how do we get kids into manufacturing, it frustrates the hell out of me. You know, why not ask them why they chose to be an engineer and their friends chose to go into trade or finance or something out, a completely different career? Why is it that you out of your friendship group chose that?
Yeah.
And how do we convince the rest of your friendship group or younger versions of your friendship group that manufacturing is a fantastic career choice?
Yeah. Very true.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you guys want to cover before we close? Are there any subjects you want to run through last year?
No, I think that kind of gives a good summary, and I'm just looking forward to how we can continue to have the conversation next year and do all of these things that we hope to kind of try and break down some of these barriers and see some greater adoption throughout the course of 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, and just reiterate the call out. You know, if there are people out there that want to give us comment, bright ideas, things we can do, you know, ultimately we're just trying to increase the adoption. We're trying to make it more accessible, trying to help UK manufacturing in particular, but industries in general, to be more competitive and more successful. So any comments, support that people can provide are very welcome.
So that concludes the first UK Automation Forum of 2025. Huge thank you to both of you for joining me, and thank you for having me as the host. Appreciate it. And all of you in the audience for watching and your comments so far. As I mentioned earlier, comments will be answered offline. There's also going to be a survey that will be sent out from Automate where you can ask some more questions, and then everything will be published on www.ukautomationforum.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.